Well, welcome back to another episode of Parker's Pensées. This is a podcast where we explore thoughts in philosophy, theology, nature, and life. I love thinking about cool stuff, so come think with me. As many of you guys will know, lots of the episodes have been on philosophy, some have been on theology, very few have been on the nature and life aspect. So I'm super excited for my guest today, Greg Brashear. And Greg has a YouTube channel, which is one of my favorites. It's called Greg's Turtle Haven. And you guys got to check it out. If you like turtles, you like frogs, even if you don't, the dude is so good with videography that it just aesthetically pleasing. So yeah, check that out. Greg, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm a big fan of the podcast.
So dude, I don't even know. There's so many spots I want to jump into, but maybe just let's start with, how'd you get into turtles?
Just growing up in Florida, there was just there was just always turtles and reptiles around, and a lot of the parts that we had lived in, we kind of moved around a lot, and it was like every place we moved, there wasn't like a lot of other little kids. There was just empty lots and kind of wilderness, and there was just always Florida box turtles, gopher tortoises, soft shells, cooters. I mean, it being a kid, and how easily accessible all of it was. It just like captured me pretty early on, and never really let go. And I think a bit of it I kind of came by honest, because my dad had a colony of box turtles as a kid in Kentucky, and they all lived in like a fenced backyard and did really well in that kind of layout, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I got my love for turtles from my dad as well, and he would take me out looking for them and stuff. Where did you live in Florida? Where'd you grow up?
So I was born in Fort Lauderdale, but lived around like Vero Beach and Sebastian mostly.
Okay.
And in those areas, Vero Beach is still very like rural in a lot of parts, and so is Sebastian, and they're just kind of smaller towns on the east coast of Florida.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting that you went the turtle route and not like the gator route. You didn't become a gator boy. You're not like.
I like those too, but it's not really like feasible. Most of the time, I played with little alligators, and I got in trouble for bringing stuff home and all that, like any other kid. But
yeah.
I liked caiman as a kid. I remember going to pet stores and staring at the caiman in the tank, because back then Florida in the late 80s and early 90s was like the Wild West for captive reptiles. So
they had caimans in pet stores?
Oh yeah. You would walk in, and I remember there was a pet store in Melbourne that we would go to, and it would be full of like little baby Florida snappers, soft shells. It was like a 150-gallon tank. And it would have Florida snappers, cooters, and then there would be like dwarf caiman, speck caiman, and some kind of crocodile in there. Because this was like 89 or 90, maybe 91, and like they still could just have whatever in there, and Florida was totally different than it is now.
Yeah, that's insane. And now there's like invasive species all around because of that, right?
Yeah. A lot of people say it's because of stuff getting released, and I think that there's a small amount of stuff that's released, but I think just some stuff escapes and just lives.
Yeah.
As if you've been keeping reptiles for any amount of time, that stuff escapes. And there's a big difference in living somewhere where your savanna monitor gets loose, and you ain't gonna make it, and then maybe you live somewhere where it could get loose and it could live, and it becomes a problem. So
yeah. Well, Florida is such a cool place. I've always been obsessed with Florida because when I started getting into turtles, I realized there's like a Florida breed for everything. It's like a Florida flavor. There's like Florida box turtle, Florida snapping turtle. And then you look through the snakes, you look through the frogs, and it's like this wild, jungly place that's like unique to Earth. It's like this one spot where it's like this jungle paradise kind of place where just a bunch of old ladies live, I guess, too.
Yeah, it's very unique. I always kind of tell people the same thing, is like when you get into peninsular Florida, it's like it just drops into this whole different like place from the rest of the US. You can get into like southern parts of Georgia, Alabama, or the Panhandle, but it's not like it is once you drop off into like the peninsula. And a good example is, if you're a snapping turtle guy like myself, is the Florida snapping turtles from peninsular Florida. They physically look different. They're built different. They're more aggressive, and they just fit in with that whole Florida vibe of just more stuff to compete with.
Yeah, it's like they look like Bowser. I think everyone says Bowser snapping turtle, whatever, or he's an alligator snapper. Like, he looks like a Florida snapper to me. He's got like the spikes. He's all aggressive. Like, they're more extreme. They hide more. They attack more. Another thing that first put me onto the Florida flavor of animals was the Florida soft shell, which apparently is super. There's a bunch of them down there.
Yeah.
But I had two little babies when I was a kid, and they get huge, man. There's big. So I went down there for a conference, and during our free time, I'm off looking in ponds and stuff like that. And there's this little tiny pond with a little fountain in it, and there's like 20 or 25 Florida soft shells in it, just on the side of the road, just chilling. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's such a Florida thing, is to just be somewhere random with some random body of water, and it's going to be completely filled with soft shells, cooters, all kinds of stuff like that. And the neat thing about Florida soft shells is like physically they're a little bit more similar to like Asian soft shells and Nile soft shells than spinies and smooths that we have.
Yeah.
I know growing up in Florida, the same thing. I was so used to Floridas, and then when I got to Georgia and saw spinies, I remember thinking that they look so different.
Yeah.
They're amazing group of turtles.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you kind of played with gators. It's not feasible, but you don't really like strike me as a snake guy either, though.
I mean, I am a snake guy. I got a snake sitting right next to me, sitting in my office. I think it's because on my YouTube channel, I don't really show my snakes that often. I did a couple episodes or videos where I would show them, and just completely tank. It's like throwing a softball into the dark. It's just like, okay, there's nobody that really wanted to see this, so I don't really show it. But yeah, I love bull snakes, king snakes.
Okay.
I really want to get this Texas indigo at the shop around the corner from my house, and
those are beautiful.
Yeah, I'm a big snake guy. I think most of what I do with snakes, I just like road cruising and seeing them and photographing them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I at one point in the early 2000s, I had a huge snake collection, and it was fun, but it was a bit more overwhelming for whatever reason. It felt more overwhelming than turtles, and my room looked like a little Brian Barczyk collection of tubs. So I got out of it.
Yeah. Okay. So, then a third thing I want to ask you about is amphibians. So it seems like you're a reptile guy. Is that a mistake too?
I mean, I really just like all reptiles and amphibians. In the last few years, I got more into salamanders and stuff like that. Kind of realized in the last few years of herping that Georgia and a couple states here in the Southeast are kind of the mecca for salamanders. There's more salamanders in the Smoky Mountains than there is in the entire rest of the world.
Wow.
And they just described a new species a few weeks ago, and that happens almost every year.
Jeez.
Because they just get so fractured because, a home range, there's one here called the Pigeon Mountain salamander, and it's because it lives on one side of this mountain. And it looks sort of like a slimy with like a big orange or tan thing up its back. And it's just unique to that small area. And so it's easy for them when they're in these little locked off areas to speciate. So they're really neat. And, there's something about them that appeals to me. I love shooting photos of them and making videos, even if other people maybe don't appreciate it that much. I love them anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's so good to hear, man. I think we're really similar in that, like, I would have had gators growing up if I could have, and my mom would never let me have a snake, so I had like a turtle collection. She just hated snakes, but I really want a smooth green grass snake. I love those; they're so cool. And again, it's my pops. My dad told me all these stories about him catching them when he's a kid, so it's just deep in here. Like, I need that.
Yeah,
yeah. And then I love reptile or amphibians as well. Frogs, turtles. I wish I had your skill, man. So another thing I want to talk about was you're in this world of turtles, which is a subset of like the herpetology world. But then you're a skater, and then you're also, is your main job like photography and videography?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So I do like freelance photo and video. Yeah,
you got these three worlds, and everyone's different. You might have some overlap, but you're living in different worlds with different language games where this means something here and this means something over here.
Oh yeah, it's like I found like whatever things that you can totally nerd and dork out on, and I just went all into each of them.
Yes, dude, I'm exactly the same way. I wonder if it's like the collector in us or something, but yeah, I live in like all these different worlds. And so it's funny, people listening to this podcast will know I really like philosophy, and some will know I really like theology, and they won't know that I really, really like turtles and stuff, man. Like, you might hear my giant African bullfrog croaking because when I do a podcast, it sounds like I'm farting, but it's my frog. How'd you get into, like, I want to know about photography. How'd you get into that?
I mean, it's funny. That was basically through skateboarding. I mean, in the when I was in high school in the mid '90s, skateboarding back then was very DIY. It wasn't popular at all. This was before like X Games and
Yeah.
Tony Hawk Games and all that stuff. And if you wanted to like make videos or do anything like that, it was all very DIY. So you would have your group of friends, and somebody would have a video camera, whether it was like they stole their dad's or they saved up and bought like a really crappy one from Sears or whatever, and we would all film each other, and inevitably somebody's gonna get like really into it. And I think that obsessive part of my brain, it was just like every time I would film like my buddy do a trick, or I would want to do something and he would film it, I'd have like a vision of what it was supposed to look like. And so I think by wanting to always get that better, that was where I started getting into filming and the technical aspects of it. And then so me and my buddies started filming each other with like little handy cams skating. And then I think it was junior and senior year I took photography. And when I started taking photography, I was like, oh, it's kind of the same thing. And then through photography, I learned more of the technical aspects and framing and just how to shoot better. And I really ended up like doing both. Photography was more of a pain in the butt back then because you had to do darkroom and develop your own film, and you didn't have like a thing to look at on the back of the camera to know what you just shot. You shot and then hoped for several days that you got it right. So, and by doing all that stuff, by the time I came out of high school, I was pretty knowledgeable at what I was doing. And one of my first gigs was shooting my mom's boss's daughter's wedding. And I'd never even been to a wedding. I didn't even know what happened. And it was funny because it was a Star Wars themed wedding. So I was like, this is awesome. Like they came down the aisle to like the same music as A New Hope when they get the medals, and they even had the track of the Wookiee at the end, like, whoa,
dang, that's insane.
So I thought every wedding was Star Wars. But I filmed it, did my best. And then the following fall, the mother of the bride got married. And so here I was back again for my mom's boss. Like now I was shooting photos of her wedding the following fall on film and hoping for the best. So, I think the experiences of shooting, skating, and then just be kind of thrown into the fire on my first couple jobs. I fed off of that. I loved it, and then I went to school for it at a 2-year college. And before I even graduated, I was doing actual work at Turner and filming bands and music videos and concerts. So I was just like, dude, I'm down. This is easy.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. Well, it's so cool. I think the reason a lot of us in like the herp world are so excited about you is because you film stuff with good quality. Like so much of it is just, popped out. I saw this turtle, look at this. And that's cool too. I like that. If you see turtles, I'll look at your video, but we appreciate you because you're so good at it. You have such a good eye for it. And I think that's been really huge and really cool for the hobby too, because we get to see the animals in our tanks. But I mean, you're out herping. Can you explain what is herping?
Yeah, well, thanks for the compliment. I'm glad that you appreciate the way I film. I tried to kind of emulate. I used to like the Marty Stauffer's Wild America and these epic shots they would get on film. So I always tried to emulate that with what I was doing. But as far as herping, I mean, I'm just doing what I've done since I was like 7 years old, going out with a backpack with a sandwich in it and a field guide. So my motivation for herping is it's funny. Like I do all the captive stuff, but during the week, especially in 2020, when work was pretty slim, during the week, like most of my time is spent herping and trying to come up with something different each week and trying to find something that maybe the average person, because I try to keep it where herp nerds would like it, but somebody maybe new or on the outskirts of knowledge would find it interesting. Like the Barber's Map Turtle episodes, for example. Yeah. Really cool native turtle. They're protected. But they're so unique, and something that maybe most people haven't seen, this turtle with a gigantic head that's capable of, crushing these, thick bivalves, Yeah. So I just want to, I just want to be able to kind of spread knowledge and appreciation for stuff, and maybe bring something to somebody's living room or whatever that they just haven't seen or known of.
Yeah. Do you so now that you have a YouTube channel and you're monetized, I'm monetized, like we're trying to make some money off of this. Has it affected like your joy for herping? Do you think like I need to get my camera, or are you able to still enjoy it?
Um, I don't know if it's affected the joy, but I definitely have had times where, whether it's the herping or my last trip through Florida, definitely been a couple times where I was so preoccupied with this mental checklist of what I needed to get shots of, how much I had to make episodes and all that stuff, that before I know it, it'd be 2 or 3 days later, and I would just feel like it all went by so fast because I was so busy with this mental checklist. So I'll try to take a day and just sit and enjoy it. And so when I go herping, I know that, say if it's a video where I want to try and show some striped neck musk turtles or something, and I'm going to go to a place and I know that it has them, I might try and film an intro or whatever. I'll get all the footage, and then to kind of keep my sanity a little bit, I'll put the phone or the camera down, and I'll just sit and enjoy the sunset. There's a guy that I follow on YouTube, and it's Chad B. It's Chad B Photography or CB Media. Actually, it's CB Media on YouTube. He's a guy from Atlanta that moved to Thailand, and he makes these epic videos traveling around Thailand. And at the end of every adventure he goes on, he has a beer at sunset. And I just got so into watching his videos that I was like, you know what, this guy's got the right idea. Like, instead of stressing about all the video stuff, I should, at the very least of the day, just sit and enjoy the sunset.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been my thing, is to kind of slow down and appreciate the moment a little bit.
Yeah. Dang, that's good advice, man. I'm gonna use that. So for the listeners, herping is kind of an unfortunate word because of herpes. Like like it just, yeah. But it comes from I think it's herpetos is the Greek, and those who know their Bibles, Romans 1 talks about suppressing the truth and worshiping idols and reptiles and creeping things, and that reptiles and creeping things is herpetos. So it's reptiles and creeping things, and so that's been taken over into the science, and herpetology is the study of reptiles and amphibians. And so that's why we're talking frogs and salamanders and turtles and snakes and all that stuff. So herping is this thing that I used to get made fun of for, but now it's cool, and now there's a whole community on YouTube. But you go out and you're like, I want to go see a snapping turtle, so I'm going to go to this pond where I know they're at. I'm going to dig into the mud. I'm going to find one. I'm going to take some sweet pictures. And I used to hide my turtle love. Like, even through high school, I was a jock, played football, wrestled. And when we were done with Saturday videos, I'm out in the ponds looking for turtles, looking around, making sure none of my classmates would see me. But now it's okay. It's fun. You've helped to make it cool again, man. So appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know if I've helped to make it cool. I hope that I just make people appreciate it more and just feel comfortable doing it. I mean, same thing. When I was in high school, I kind of kept it a little bit, I mean, when you're in high school, you're a teenager and you're awkward, and
right.
I mean, anything makes you insecure. And I think when I was in my 20s and skating a lot, there were definitely times where I would kind of keep it on the down low, but then we'd be at a skate spot and I'd see a creek behind the building we were at. Like, dude, I got to go pee. And I'd go, piss in the woods, and I'd tiptoe down to the creek and come back with a snake or a snapping turtle and scare my friends. And they started getting to know me as like the guy that's into that, and they thought it was cool.
Yeah.
I have buddies that grew up in like Huntington Beach, and they'd never seen a snapping turtle in their lives. And they thought it was crazy that I would just go jump in the water and yank this, dragon out of there and scare the heck out of everybody with it. So, I definitely got more comfortable with it through my 20s. And by the time I was in my 30s, like, it was like, just one of the ways I would just divide up my time. And, obviously having like personal collections of stuff from the time I was like 7 years old also, has an effect. Cause sometimes, people would come over to your house and they'd be like, oh, wow, I didn't know you were into this,
Yeah, especially living in different contexts like you do, like I do, where it's like you've talked to this dude for 5 years about skating, about videos, whatever, and they don't know, just hadn't come up yet, maybe, or they haven't seen you jump in the water yet. But for me, I kind of found an acceptable route was I would go fishing with my friends all the time, and I'm always keeping an eye, looking for the snapping turtles, and then it would come out and be like, all right, dude, I'm done. I need to go get that turtle right there. Yeah. So something that's really cool too. So we got like Steve Irwin. I'm sure you grew up watching him too. I used to always be like, dude, do an episode on alligator snapping turtles. Like, just do that. They live in our country. Um, uh, there's like all sorts of different wildlife shows, and I always wanted them to do our country. Do the states, do
Yeah.
Florida, because we got so much cool stuff. And so that's what I love. You're finding these giant alligator snapping turtles. You have like you have names for them. You know the creeks they live in and stuff. Can you explain like? Well, we talked about turtles. I guess how do you get into alligator snapping turtles? Then we can start going into the big ones that you find.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, alligator snapping turtles were like the T-Rex of turtles. So it
Mhm.
was like the number one coolest possible, and so growing up in South Florida, they didn't live there.
Okay.
I always, like everybody else, I think you wish they did, and
Yeah.
you would catch, commons or whatever, and you'd be like, oh, it's an alligator snapper. Then you look at,
Always.
it's a common or it's a Florida, which is still cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I moved to Georgia in my teen years, kind of went through not really looking for them and not really knowing a lot about how to look for them. And where I live near Atlanta, I mean, for decades, they told us like they only live in South Georgia. They only live in South Georgia. Like the book rules said that
Yeah.
they live there, and like the turtles never got a copy of that rule book. And it wasn't until 2011 they knew that they were 40 minutes south of Atlanta, and then in 2012 I found a hatchling just on the outskirts of Atlanta. So I
Wow.
found them further north than they've ever been documented when I found that hatchling. It was funny because it was a hatchling, and I was just out kind of herping and taking pictures of loggerhead musks and stuff like that. And I thought it was a common snapper when I first found it, because the ones here, the head is shaped different, and
Hmm.
the shell. And so when you see the hatchlings, they don't have that pointy head. They have like a little round head. So I thought it was a common. Then I flipped it over and looked at it closer, and I was like, this is an alligator snapper. And my mind was trying to rationalize it. I was like, oh, somebody released a pet. So I kind of took a photo of it. And then as I was photographing, I just was noticing it was different, because I'd had them growing up and everything.
Hmm.
This one's different. And I took photos, and then I realized I took lousy photos, and I took them on like an app. So it's
Oh.
like early days. This was like 2012. So Instagram had just started, and I was
Uh-huh.
on Android, and Instagram wasn't on Android. So I took it on like an app that was like fake Instagram. So I took it with a horrible filter on it, and then I let it go.
Oh man.
And so when I got back to the car and I wasn't in the sun, I realized my photos were garbage and I couldn't
Dude.
find the turtle again. So that was in like October. So it was a pretty fresh hatchling. So I knew that um, spring of 2013 it was on, and I was just going to start finding them. And I did. I just started finding them left and right. And what it is that was up the upper Flint River drainage. And they just, the turtles never got a rule book. And
Yeah.
they come all the way up the Flint River, basically to where it starts under the airport. And all those tributaries, they can go into there, and they do really well in that habitat. And it's really cool because, they're a really good example of what an untrapped, uncommercially hit population looks like.
Yeah.
And with how long they live, you've got these different generations of adults and then sub-adults and juveniles. And, in certain areas, they're one of the most abundant turtles there is, because there's just so many generations of them.
Yeah.
And they hide so well.
Hmm.
So once I started learning more about what to look for and how to find them, I mean, I'd been herping my whole life, so I knew how to find certain things. And then once I started realizing what to look for on the bottom and what they eat and the signs they leave behind, eventually it just got to where, I just figured out, the best ways to find them and what to look for. So
Yeah, dude, that's something that's really cool about your videos is I live in Illinois, and like all our rivers just suck. They're all muddy and stuff, so it's really hard to walk through. Plus it's very polluted and stuff. You cut your feet all the time. You used to always do that. But it's hard, you can't see the bottom. In your videos, it's so cool because you're like, there's a tail drag. And
yeah,
for those watching the YouTube, there's a big picture. That's Greg's picture of a Swanee alligator snapping turtle, which is it another species or is it a
yeah,
subspecies?
yeah. They're separate species. They were
Okay.
separated at the species level because the genetic differentiation was just so significant.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're significantly different, but you
Okay.
really have to look at the other species of alligator snappers side by side to
Yeah.
really appreciate it. But when you do see them, if you've seen a lot of alligator snappers and then you see a Swanee, you're like, oh, this is like a
Right.
different turtle.
Yeah. And so there's these giant turtles and everyone always says how they get up to like 200, 250 pounds. And I think in the wild they probably don't get that big that often. Probably 100 pounds is like a very big size alligator snapping turtle, which is gigantic still. But you can see in his videos, he'll say, look, there's a tail drag. And you can see it in the sand that this turtle's been rooting around and dragging his gigantic tail through. That's so cool. I love how you've been doing it so long. You're like, yeah, I know what's up. I can just look at this and see it.
Well, and to the point about the water clarity, trust me, it's not every time I go out the water's clear.
Okay.
This year was horrible. Like
Yeah.
it was so hard to get water clarity this year. Like one of my favorite places was only clear 2 or 3 times the entire year. They've done so much like development upstream,
Oh man.
agricultural impact, and then we had so much rain. I don't know if that stream will ever be as good as it was for looking for turtles
Yeah.
ever again, unfortunately. But the times when it does get clear, it's funny. Like especially those big males, they move a lot of real estate when they're coming in and out of the bank
Right.
and everything. And the places that they really like, especially at the bottom, is sandy. It
Hmm.
looks like a gopher tortoise mound. You know, a gopher tortoise, when it excavates a burrow, it has this big, like pitcher's mound looking thing in front of the burrow. And
Yeah.
these big males, when they're going out from under the bank or under these logs, they leave these big, burrows. And, their primary activity is from like 2 a.m. to sunrise. And so if you get to these streams at 6 a.m. or whenever sunrise is, you'll actually see sediment just pouring out from under banks and under logs where they've gone back up under there and they're trying to dig their way back in. So you can kind of
Yeah.
see where they all go, and that's pretty cool. And it's cool to see that the same individuals will use the same area for a long time, as long as food's good and as long as they're not being bothered.
Yeah. That's so sweet, dude. I wanted to ask about water clarity for the animals. So that stream being cloudy now, will that affect like how much do the loggerhead musks and the other turtles? How much does water clarity affect their hunting?
I would say it doesn't really affect it that much. I mean, you do find higher concentrations of loggerhead mucks in clear water, but I think it may have less to do with water clarity and more to do with amount of snails and
Okay.
mussels. So probably water quality over clarity.
Okay.
And if the water is silty and seemingly dirty, for filter feeders like clams and mussels and stuff, that's actually good for them. So they'll actually get really abundant even though the water's not clear. So it's kind of funny how there's like different elements, and it's not always cut and dry. For alligator snapping turtles, I mean, they have that nose that they have. I mean, you can see it in the background
Hmm.
behind us. It's like a dog's nose. It's spongy. It's got little pores in it.
Hmm.
And you can feel it with your finger if you're careful. You can feel that thing. It's just a sensory powerhouse. And I've watched them when they feed, and when they're feeding on stuff that's buried in the sand, they're kind of taking it and dabbing it, and picking
Yeah.
up little like sensory cues. And then when something's there, they just push it into the sand, and then they start digging, and they kind of make like a little snow angel in the bottom where they take both arms and they just kind of scoop it out.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see. And so I think that's how in places like South Georgia, Louisiana, where the water is that black water, I think that's how they're finding food.
Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. That brings me to another point. Okay, so you got Flint River. That's another Instagram that you have is Flint River
Yep.
Turtles. And I started following you when you were Dead Snake Greg, or you still have that one, I think too. And then I found this other guy, and it was Greg's Turtle Haven. I was like, this guy's awesome, man. And I realized it was you. And then I found Flint River Turtles. I'm like, this guy's even better. Holy cow! And it was you again, dude. It's just funny each time I find these cool ones. But in the Flint River, you talked about the head shape and how they have smaller heads as juveniles and they look more like commons. Are they a subset of? Can
So
you explain the two and how it was three and then the subset kind of
yeah.
stuff?
So previous to the 2014 paper, alligator snapping turtles were all Taminkii.
Okay.
But it was well known, and it's mentioned in Pritchard's book, that certain areas they were physically different. Like they knew that the Swanee population was a little different. They knew that the ones out of the Flint River had bigger heads and less super marginals. And then they knew that the ones out west had more super marginals. A lot of times you'll see four. And
Can you explain real quick what's a super marginal?
so those are the extra scutes along the side of the shell. in most populations, whether it's Suwannee or Westerns, they're pretty good size and pretty noticeable. But for whatever reason, in the Flint River, they're really small, and some of them they're absent. I've got
Yeah.
photos of a dead one that has no supermarginals, which is,
Wow.
there's no record of that before. But a lot of times, the ones I find, they'll either have like two, and like if they have two, then one of them's poorly developed, or they'll just have one, and they're real small. They look like a sticker somebody just on the shell. So it's really interesting that they have that. And then, but when they did the 2014 paper, they started looking at river drainages, and it was, they had college students and everybody sampling these rivers from the Trinity and the Nietzsche's in Texas all the way to the Suwannee. So they were sampling all these rivers and doing genetic work and all that stuff. And then they found that the main genetic differences were, I think it's Trinity and Nietzsche's in Texas all the way to Mobile, to Pascagoula. And then there was Pascagoula and Pearl. And then there was Mobile and Pensacola. And then there was Apalachicola and Suwannee. And then looking at those different groups, they were saying the ones with the most, like the highest spike of genetic differences was, they grouped all those ones, west of Apalachicola, they were just the Western, and then Apalachicola drainage, which is Flint, Chattahoochee, they join and become the Apalachicola, and then the Choctawhatchee, Econfina Creek, the Ocklawahnee River, those all became Apalachicola, and then the Suwannee River drainage was further over and more separate, and it became the Suwannees. And then, so they were, and then the paper came out, and they kind of listed the ways to tell the differences. And one of them they were looking at was the marginals over the tail, and the Suwannees have like a really like big, wide, round, it kind of scoops out around the tail. Mm-hmm. And that's because those two supermarginals are actually the same bone as the ones immediately next to them. Wow. So as the turtle grows and the shell expands, those bones are expanding like this around the tail, and they're just kind of dragging those supermarginals over the tail with them. Yeah. So that's how they get that like really wide, kind of lunate shape to the marginals over the tail. And then the Western and the Apalachicola have kind of more triangular. And the problem is in the Westerns and the Apalachicolas, there's so much variability in that. Okay. And every animal, there's individuals. I've caught Taminkii in Alabama that had a round Suwannee shaped notch over the tail. I've caught an Apalachicola in the Flint that had that shape. It seems in those it's a recessive trait, and then in the Suwannee it's a dominant trait. Yeah. And then I watched a video from FWC, and they had a Suwannee with more of a narrow notch, and so that's the recessive trait in them. But there is physical bone differences. So at any rate, they were separated in 3 species, and then a guy named Folk wrote a paper that he couldn't tell the difference in the Apalachicolas from the Westerns, and he had looked at a handful from Spring Creek in South Georgia, and he'd looked at a bunch from Pensacola, which is actually a Western, but he wrote his paper and said he couldn't tell the difference, so there's no difference. And then all his buddies pushed his paper through, and then now it's no longer recognized. So that's how taxonomy works. So dang.
Well, so what do you think about that?
It's low hanging fruit for another student to come through, because they're the ones in the Flint, the Chattahoochee, the Apalachicola are, to me, I look at a lot of alligator snapping. Right. I've had my hands on all of them, and I'll tell you now, they're different. You can look at the skull, and the ones from the Flint Apalachicola drainage, the eyes are closer to the tip of the snout. Yeah. And what that does is that allows that rear part of the head to expand more for more musculature for eating mussels.
And that's their diet in that river.
And the skull's thicker. When I was down at Peter Pritchard's Chelonian Research Institute, I had a skull from the largest Suwanniensis on record. And then I had a skull from one in South Georgia. And the skulls were almost close in size, but the one from South Georgia was thicker than that 200-pound Suwanniensis. Wow. And it's just because their skull needs to be really rigid, because I've watched them eat. When they're eating off the bottom, they're not cherry picking those clams and mussels. They're scooping, and they're getting gravel and rocks. Oh. They're grinding all that stuff up. So they need their skull to not fracture.
Yeah. Well, what are Suwannees? What's their diet? How is their diet different, I guess?
From what I've observed, they're more similar to like westerns. Like they're more of a generalist and an
Yeah.
active predator. So I remember the first time I observed a lot of Swanensis activity. I was at a place and it was around sunset, and it was just like somebody flipped a switch. These little snouts were coming up of all these juveniles, and they were moving real quick. And I'd never seen that before. All the alligator snapping turtles I've seen have been pretty deliberate and pretty slow. And the Swanensis, they were coming up, poking their snout, and then they were just jamming their head between rocks and moving stuff around and moving very quickly. And then I've seen a lot of videos of them in the Santa Fe River, where there's like these guys that go looking for fossils, and they're, so they're diving these, these rivers down there, and they'll come across, Swanee alligator snappers pretty commonly, and they bolt like soft shells. So
Yeah.
they're much more, they seem to be more active and more predatory, I would say. I know
Is that
that
a Florida thing?
the diet studies, they have a lot of other turtles in their diet.
Yeah.
They find mammals, birds, but also a lot of mollusks. I mean, their skull is really large and rigid as well.
Yeah.
But they're less of a specialist.
Yeah. Is that so? I was thinking about this when I was a kid. I was like, there's alligator snappers. Lots of things have a Florida version, and I was like, I wonder if there's like a Florida version of alligator snapping turtles. Is that the Swanee? Could we say that's like the Florida version, or?
Yeah. I would say, yeah, it kind of, yeah, it makes me think like that too. Like, because when I see, a Swanee, whether it's from South Georgia or Florida, as soon as I get my hands on it and I'm looking at it, it's kind of like, I'm so used to the ones I catch all the time. I see them and I'm like, wow, I don't know you, like just, the head being so different, the eyes are like a little bit different. The eyes are like a brighter, like a white,
Yeah.
and just,
Are they usually yellow too?
so the yellow thing is like a whole interesting thing in that, like, so with Swanees and the Apalachicolas, they're all going to turn yellow as adults. It's just the ontogenetic change.
Okay.
The Swanees, though, I've caught a few hatchlings, and I've noticed that they do seem to start off a lighter color, like a light tan or like a cream color. And then, like, if you were to flip one over and look at the bottom, the little reticulations on the bottom. I got some photos on my Flickr of a young one. I bring these white backgrounds with me when I do these alligator snapping turtle things. So I'll go in the field and I'll put a white background down and shoot some photos. But
Oh, I thought you were bringing them home. I was like, dude, that's a
no. I
trip.
have like these like construction papers, because what I'll do is I'll go to Walmart and I'll just get those when I head out in the field if I want to do something on a white background. So yeah, I just lay them down, like crop out, so all you see is the white background, hit it with a little flash, and but yeah, you can see on the bottom of those Swanees, it's like much lighter color.
Yeah.
And it seems like as they get older, they just get lighter and lighter, whereas Apalachicolas start off the darkest
Okay.
things, but as they get older, the yellow color really starts to come on and become pretty bright. So
Yeah. Well, you mentioned about the skull size of the Apalachicola, and that made me think of Bullet Tooth Tony. And
yeah.
the story is sad, but like it's a happy story now. So can you tell us what's up with Bullet Tooth Tony?
Yeah, he is a alligator snapping turtle that I was out herping, and there's a spot that I've gone to, and it's a place where, like, my buddy, I don't know if you know NKF herping, my buddy Noah, we had gone one night with his dad, and it's a really small area, and it's really popular with fishermen. There's a lot of alligator snappers there, and I was there one day, and I had found him just kind of laying in shallow water, and I was like, oh dude, I just walked up on an alligator snapper in the middle of the day, this is awesome. And then he wasn't moving, and I was like, he's dead. I'm gonna have to find some fire ants and get the skull and the shell, And then I picked him up. He started to move, and I saw that his head had this big wound, kind of in the back where all the musculature is, and it had turned black. It was all infected, and so I saw that he was alive, but because they were protected, I was like, well, I can't really do anything. I was like, I'm gonna move him, put him in somewhere safe. The water was flowing, so I was like, he'll be in like clean flowing water. I'll come back tomorrow. Came back the next day, still sitting there, hadn't moved an inch from where I put him.
Wow.
And I was like, well, I'll come back tomorrow. It's annoying because the place was like a 50-minute drive. So every day I'm making this like 1 hour drive.
Yeah.
So by the third day he hadn't moved, and my thought was, if somebody shot this thing and killed it, that's, you know, that's more lame than me trying to save it.
Yeah.
So I brought him back and started treating it, and with kind of cleaning it out and some dry docking, and he started to really start to get more active. And then eventually all the black stuff started to come out. And then one day I was pulling all that out. It was just necrotic tissue. And then
Mm-hmm.
in the center of it was the slug.
Whoa.
I have that around my house somewhere.
Dang.
Yeah. And so the slug came out, and then it was just this big, you know, deep thing. And the bullet had gone in and gone alongside some of the bone where the muscle attaches.
Huh.
So like when he opens and closes his mouth, you would see that stuff like move inside there. So I had, you know, taking good care of him. And, you know, then when I got my permit, you know, I just told him, I was like, look, man, I have this one. Here's the GPS point where I got him. You know, I made the call to save him, and they were, you know, okay with that. You're not supposed to do that. I wouldn't recommend anybody do that without asking first. But I was just like, I've got to do something instead of nothing.
Yeah.
And just in the last, you know, couple of years, he's done really well. And in the beginning, he was kind of janky because he couldn't get those muscles to really work on one side when he would eat.
Yeah.
Kind of like Popeye, like kind of chew with one side of his head. And then, you know, now it's healed up so much. And, you know, now that I'm doing all these educational presentations, he's a good animal to bring with me to talk about, you know, kind of the effects of just general ignorance.
Right.
You know, like somebody for whatever reason caught him fishing, and they thought like, oh, this is annoying that you're biting my lure, so I'm going to shoot you in the head. And, you know, that these animals are tough.
Yeah.
You know, that brain's real small, so it's easy to miss.
That's right.
And so it's unfortunate people do that. And so my job as a certified Georgia wildlife educator is to spread, you know, better information and hopefully some appreciation. I would like for people that live here to not only know more about them, but to be proud of them, that, you know, we have these epic, you know, centurions that live in the water, and they're mysterious, and, you know, I think are a lot cooler than a bald eagle.
Seriously. Yeah, that should be the national animal there. Bullet Tooth Tony, is that from Snatch? I forgot what movie that's from.
It is. He's the guy in Snatch that got shot in the head.
Yeah.
And he had like the little like silver tooth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. Greg, can you show us on the shirt? Like, was it in his skull or was it in the muscle behind there?
The bullet went in right here.
Okay.
So it was where this musculature, where it attaches right here.
Yeah.
It had like peeled back. So, but the bullet went right in there.
Okay.
And then so over time, that musculature has kind of grown back.
And there's just so much just meat in there that it just stopped the bullet.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And people that eat them, they'll tell you that that's like some of the best meat.
Because they got these giant jaws. They're crushing, like you said, rocks and sand and gravel, snails.
Yeah. When you get into like those really big ones, those really old ones, you know, their growth slows down when they hit a certain point. And the ones up here, they're not really hitting 100 pounds because they're in these really small streams.
Yeah.
And, you know, shallow flowing water. It doesn't really help them to be 125 pounds. So a big one up here is about 90, maybe 100.
Okay.
But by the time they reach, you know, 75 pounds, their growth slows down so much that most of it growth goes into the head. So, you know, when you find these guys that are old, they just have these, you know, the back of their head looks like a basketball.
Yeah.
And it's just all that musculature.
Dang, man. So what people don't get about having like random passions and stuff like that is I don't follow like sports. I work for a sports ministry, but I don't really follow sports that much. I like wrestling and stuff like that, but how jacked people get about like the playoffs or like something like that. Like they get so amped. If I were to see an alligator snapping turtle in a creek, I would lose my mind. Like it would just be it, because what people don't get, like you obsess over something for so long, you have them, you look at them in your tank all the time. To see it in the wild is something different. Like that's it. I've been looking for you forever, and here you are.
And I still get it every single time.
Yeah.
You know, I've got them in my backyard, and, you know, and it's pretty natural setups. But if I go down to, you know, a stream that I know has them, and I walk down to the water and there's one there, I still get that like adrenaline. It's like, as soon as I see one, I'm like, well, it's going to be a late night because I'm not going to sleep, you know, right at night, you know.
Dude.
And I've taken friends out before that have never seen one in their life, and it's really cool to see their appreciation for it, because I've taken a couple dudes out through my buddy Noah and like it was one of them was like a guy from like out west or something. And it was funny because I was like, this dude's never been in a creek before in his life.
Mm.
I could tell like the way he's walking through there, and like, you know, at one point in that night, he was carrying around like, a 90-pound alligator snapper.
Yeah.
Then I was going and getting more. I just kept bringing them back and piling them up on the sand for these guys to look at, and it's really cool. And it's you can't do that with everybody, but through videos,
Yeah.
you can kind of do that. And so that's like kind of the idea is like, I would love it if the average Joe started to appreciate them and be like, oh man, these really cool things live here. As Carl Franklin calls them, the Paul Bunyan of turtles.
Yeah. Well, dude, so this is what's cool. I had John Richards on, and he kind of made alligator snapping turtles able to be pets. Like he put that in there. And now a lot of people are studying herpetology. I follow them all on Instagram, and it's because of the little turtle that they had when they were a kid. And then what you're doing is you're taking that to the next level and showing us them in the wild. And just for me, dude, I'm probably never gonna eat a turtle. Like just probably never gonna happen. But I'm also never gonna throw anything into a creek ever in my life. Like just because of who I am, because I studied turtles my whole life and catch them, and it's like, dude, what the heck? Like that was always something that triggered me super bad when someone would litter. But like because of your videos, there's going to be kids who grow up like that who are like, I'm never going to litter. No, dude, hey, pick up your stupid net or take up your trout line. What are you doing? Are you serious? And it's just going to be more people being more conscientious because they love these animals and they say, dude, a freaking alligator snapping turtle can get his neck caught on that. Do you really want that? Come on, dude, take your stupid trout line up.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is no one needs a pet turtle. Like no
Mm.
one. I don't need a pet turtle. I don't need a backyard filled with them.
Mm.
But I love them, and there's a lot of them that need homes. And so, I do it for that reason. I do it for education. But there's a lot of people that, maybe they want a turtle, but they don't have means, or they're
Yeah.
not old enough, or, don't have their own house. But, so maybe through videos, they can kind of get to enjoy them more. And I think maybe for some people, if they get to see what they are in the wild and what it takes, what they really need, maybe it would curb somebody from getting one that's not going to give it a great home. And maybe they'd end up releasing it where they shouldn't, or maybe they would end up, putting it on Craigslist, or doing something goofy that's not going to help the animal at all. And then
Yeah.
maybe make the hobby look bad.
Yeah, totally. I think that's why I like your channel is called Greg's Turtle Haven, and you've taken in a lot of these guys. For me, I still I still have a little bit of animosity towards red ears because I mean, you know the story about red ears, and they're everywhere, and everyone gets them, and they're the reason people think that they have salmonella because they were on little stores, had them up front. My dad would get them as a kid, and kids would lick them or put them in their mouth and get salmonella. But you take in red ears. Can you just like warn the fans about red ear sliders?
Yeah, I would say the biggest warning with red-eared sliders is just that they're not. I don't care who sells it to you and told you they won't get big or that they'll be easy. And I know they're at PetSmart and Petco and all the major shops, and the thing is a lot of times when you go into that reptile section, what's the cheapest animal there? It's
Mm.
going to be those red-eared sliders. And long run, they're going to be the most expensive.
Mm.
You're going to end up having to get an aquarium or a stock tank or build a pond, and you got to feed them, you got to clean them. They're more headache than a monitor lizard.
Yeah.
So like you're better off like appreciating them at a park or a zoo or something like that. But like a red-eared slider is a lot of people get them and then they raise them up to a size. And, oh well, we're going to go let them go in the wild. And the red-eared slider is so adaptable. They can take to eating vegetation, and now they've just pushed cooters because they're so aggressive about feeding and
Mhm.
taking over. They're going to push cooters out of their native grazing areas, and they're going to eat all that. They can also eat and scavenge, so they're going to compete directly with common musks and snappers and soft shells. They're going to compete for basking areas with other basking turtles,
Mhm.
and then they can also eat mollusks. I mean, I've seen them get expanded heads like map turtles.
Wow.
They're going to push out map turtles and specialists like that. So um, I would tell people, don't ever release a red-eared slider, and if it's even a thought that you couldn't take care of it, just don't do it. My personal belief is probably a bit harsh, but I just don't think they should be sold anymore at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I don't think that I personally don't think pet stores should sell turtles anymore, really, that much at all, because I don't think the return for the pet store is that great. I don't think the return that the animals get is that great,
Mhm.
and it just kind of fuels that that desire of people to just buy something without a real plan.
Yeah.
And nobody gets a great deal out of it. So
Yeah.
that's my opinion. You know, it just based on what I see, and that, you know, during, you know, March through October, every week somebody's trying to give me a red-eared slider.
Right. Yeah, it's unreal, man. I part of me sometimes I can be pretty cynical, and I think I go in pet shops and I see a turtle in a tiny tank, and I'm like, I have to get this. I have to buy this turtle right now. And I'm like, I can't. My wife will destroy me. But I wonder. Part of me wonders if they're doing that on purpose. But then secondly, like turtles are dirty. They take a lot of work. You want to keep them clean. You want to, especially with the tank, it's going to be even harder because you can't really make it bioactive and stuff like that. If someone were watching this and wanted to get a turtle, like we both say, don't get a red ear. What's a good turtle for someone to get if they're going to be responsible and say this is a lifetime commitment kind of thing?
I would lean towards a captive bred
Mhm.
painted turtle. You know,
Okay.
any of the painted turtle species, they're going to be really forgiving of temperature, of food. You can go out of town for a few days and they're fine. Easy to house because they're small. So if you wanted to go the aquarium route, you know, you can get, you know, an Eastern painted turtle and it'll do fine in
Yeah.
a, you know, 75 to 100-gallon aquarium. It can do fine in a, you know, a Tractor Supply tough stuff, you
Mhm.
know, 110-gallon stock tank. That's my personal. I think everybody should just have one of those instead of an aquarium. The animals love it more. They're easy to take care of, easy to clean.
Yeah.
Um, and then if you didn't want to do a painted turtle, you could do like a male spiny soft shell. They're really awesome to watch swim. It's fun to watch them bury in sand. They don't get very big. Most males max out around 7 inches.
Mhm.
And then I'm a huge fan of the musk turtles.
Yeah.
There are people captive breeding common musk turtles, the odoratus. There's razorback musk turtles, which are a little bit bigger, but still great personality, still smaller than any red ear. And then loggerhead musk turtles are really good. They're, as you start to get into like loggerheads and striped necks, there's less people captive breeding them and more
Yeah.
people poaching them.
Okay.
So there's more of a vetting process when you get those. But those are really the ones that I recommend the most.
Yeah.
Especially with something being cold hardy is really important, because I recommend, if you can get your turtle outdoors, it's like a night and day difference in how much healthier it is, how much natural behavior you're going to see. It's just
Natural
a happier
sunlight.
animal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we got big plans, man. We got big plans for all this kind of stuff. I'm so excited for. I'm living on campus here, finishing up my master's degrees, and when we're out of here, ponds and tough stuff and more turtles. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
But I've been telling people to watch your video on you do one on musk turtles, on which one's the best to have and stuff. So I'll put the link in the description too, so you can see. Once you see these musk turtles, it's insane, and all the ones that you mentioned are really fun turtles to watch. I mean, to watch them rooting around. It's fun as you when you get a turtle, it's not just a turtle though. I have a separate tank here full of guppies and Mexican dwarf crayfish that I'm breeding to feed my animals because I don't want to just give them turtle sticks. So it's funny when people think they're getting a turtle, and if you're going to do it right, you'll end up watching a ton of Greg's videos. You'll watch a bunch of different videos, and you'll end up with all these different tanks in order to care for your animal well, which is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I tell people that, you know, before you get a turtle, any turtle, think long and hard about it, because, you know, people call it a hobby, but it's not. It's a lifestyle.
Right.
A turtle is going to live longer than anything else in that pet store or anything else on that, you know, website. And so when you get a turtle, like, you're taking on a real commitment. So it's a lifestyle.
Mhm.
And so when you take that on, you know, you're going to move with it. So you're going to move, you know, cages, maybe you're going to upgrade setups. If you get into building ponds, you know, you just improved its life, but you've also improved your own quality of life. I mean, I I can have the worst day and I can go sit in my backyard and I've got like 3 or 4 ponds
Mhm.
near the water, and, you know, the water's doing different things in each one, and I just got this new aquascape, you know, stream in my backyard, and so I have this like really peaceful environment that is 100% for the turtles. And then the side benefit is like my quality of life is better
Yeah.
because I have this amazing environment I can just sit in and enjoy. So turtles are a lifestyle. Turtles and tortoises are a lifestyle, and if you want to call it a hobby and you want to treat it like a hobby, then you might not be invested enough.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes people in the hobby will say like, "Oh, I want a more challenging thing," and it's like, you're not talking about it right, man. You shouldn't want to like, I don't know if I can care for this. Let's see if it's a challenge. Like that's an animal, dude. Get out of
Yeah,
here.
yeah. It's like if somebody told me they skated as a hobby, I'd be like, dude, you don't skate.
Yeah, yeah,
Like skateboarding is a lifestyle.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. That's right.
A hobby is like train sets in your basement, or like
You
flying
triggered all the
around on
train
a
people,
unicycle
man.
or something. You know?
Those train people are all mad now. Hey, being a trainer is a whatever they call themselves, a lifestyle. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. But when you come with live things,
Yeah,
uh,
I think it's disrespectful when you have living things depending on you to call it a hobby.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, my
That's good.
kids are my hobby. Can you imagine saying that?
Right, right, right. Yeah. Uh, so what you mentioned about having ponds in your backyard and being good for your quality of life, I feel that same thing, man. When I'm super stressed about work or school or whatever, and I can come look at even looking at the guppies really helps me a lot. But I go down to the pond and I look for snapping turtles, and it just finally I can take my mind off all this stuff going on because I'm looking for that turtle. And there's something about being in that state of mind when you're searching for stuff and you're focused, and it just helps you like let go and you're in nature. So for me, I'm a Christian. I'm in the Bible, one of the first things that man was called to do was taxonomy, was to name the animals, right? So we see God telling Adam, "What do you want to name this?" And so I find a theological purpose behind that. Like we're made to rule over, and a lot of times people said dominion in like a that means we freaking harvest all these alligator snappers. Like no, no, dominion is you care for them, and if you're gonna harvest them, you do it in an appropriate way, and you take care of the earth. You don't rape nature for your own benefit.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I've had people that have kind of put it that way too, where they think that the dominion means that like everything exists at our pleasure. And I think that maybe it means that dominion is supposed to be more for us to be stewards and take care of these things because we are the highest life form,
Yeah.
for better or worse. It's our job to take care of things because we can screw things up really quick and a
So
lot
quick.
faster than we can fix things. So
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of responsibility that comes with being a hairless ape.
Yeah, and it goes so quick, man. Like Australia is the perfect test case. Florida is a pretty good test case too. You release one thing and you think it's going to eat something else, and then you get a whole host of problems from not thinking things through, from not talking to herpers like you, dude. Which is so funny. Like anyone who's looking for that next breakthrough in their paper should go and study the snappers that live in Greg's backyard. But they need to actually talk to you, man, because if you come in out of nowhere and you're trying to find these turtles, talk to the guy who knows them. This is his backyard, and I think oftentimes we do that and we mess things up because we don't talk to the natives and we don't say like, what's up, what's going on? I need to talk to you at the ground level. You see it in government all the time too, man, being
That was
ruled
one of
from
the
the top
great
down.
things. That was one of the great things about Pritchard is he
Mhm.
always believed in talking to the locals. He was like,
Yeah,
these people live it. They know more than we do. If we want to learn anything, we need to talk to them. And I think now sometimes there's a little bit of friction between academics and you know um, people like myself. Maybe I think some academics probably they take anything I say with a grain of salt because I don't have any paper with my name on it hanging
right,
on my wall that says anything. And for to them I'm just a hillbilly, like the turtle man from Kentucky. I
right, right,
have
right.
my teeth. So um, I'm always willing to reach out and help anybody. And I've got friends that are really well known and really amazing turtle academics. Like my buddy Grover Brown is the best there is. I
Yeah,
love that guy. He's the next Peter Pritchard in my eyes. I love that
sure.
guy.
Yeah.
And then you got Luke Pearson, who's doing amazing work, and he shares it on the alligator snapping turtle pages on Facebook with what he's doing in Mississippi. So I think that now that we're in this age of information, um, I don't think that anybody should really be hoarding information anymore. I think we're all going to end up getting to a point where, especially if we're all people caring about the same animals, we should
Right.
all be kind of sharing it and working together. And especially if we also are under threat from people coming from out of this country to take our animals.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I follow that dude. I know exactly who you're talking about, actually, in mine too. Yeah, dude, it's terrible. So, finishing up, that's a great point that you made too. And the age of information is funny because you can do all the research yourself now. It's all you can watch YouTube, and if someone's gonna hoard their information, someone else is gonna go and they're gonna monetize it, and they're gonna make money off the YouTube video. And so you can give yourself a degree, and I don't want to diminish the academic side either. Like it's important. We need those guys to do that. We have to, and we need the lawmakers to listen to them too and open up stuff or close things down, whatever. But yeah, it's funny because in your videos, and you mentioned a couple Latin phrases and stuff here, but you're good with the Latin. It's so good. I love
Yeah,
hearing you speak about it. 'Cause you do the hard work of studying it too.
yeah. I know all the Latin names. I mean, before I was 10 years old, I was memorizing the Latin names of
Mm,
everything because I wasn't reading books for kids. I was reading like field guides and
right.
encyclopedias and stuff. So I like, I would ask my parents about, how to pronounce this Latin name or that. And I
Mhm.
don't even think they knew. They just like, oh, like this. So yeah, I think in my videos, I don't always go too far into Latin names because I want the information to be palatable. You
Mhm.
know, if somebody is really wanting to get into this and really interested, but you just start hitting them hard with a bunch of Latin names and
Right.
scientific terminology, it's really hard for somebody new to stomach that. And
Yeah.
so, I would like to be a bridge between completely new and then getting into it. I mean, if I want to, I mean, I can sit down and talk all the technical stuff.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, we do need the academics. We do need the people with PhDs, especially for an example, like when they do want to make laws pertaining to turtles, whether it's captive stuff or laws on wild animals. They're not really going to listen to somebody like me as much as they are that a guy that has PhD next to his name,
Right. Right.
So we're all in this together. We need to work on it together. And I just think that, it kind of comes back to the lifestyle thing.
Yeah.
If you're in this lifestyle, if you're down for life, you're ride or die, you're going to do what it takes.
That's right. Yeah, man. Something just it's frustrating for me in Illinois right now. I don't know if I'll stay here or not, but I have a passion. I want to help alligator snappers come back. I don't know how much they were affected here. I don't think a lot of people are harvesting them. Maybe it's just weather change kind of stuff. But and there's only a tiny population in Southern Illinois, but it would be sweet to breed them and help them here. My other like more realistic passion, because it takes forever for alligator snappers to breed, would be blandings and spotteds, because those were something that was here that were completely destroyed almost by industrialization. And it happens all the time here. I look around and I say, that's a really good marsh over there. I come back the next week and it's a parking lot. And it's
Yeah.
like, just nobody cares. It's just, I need this property and this thing. I'm a capitalist. I like capitalism, but I like freaking turtles too, man. And I wish that you would take that into consideration.
Yeah. Yeah. I think with the alligator snappers in Illinois, you're talking about a fringe population. I mean,
Mhm.
the edge of their range.
Yeah.
And, talking about the business of commercializing them, it would have been, if you think about it, it would have been such a pain in the butt to trap up there, get very few animals, you know, at all anyway, and then
Yeah.
bring them down to Louisiana where the
Right.
market was. So
Yeah.
I don't really think that they were trapped that heavily there. I think there's incidental catch, trot lines,
Mhm.
people catching them on their own and eating them, but I don't
And
think
they're
they
already
were
so small
commercial.
anyways. Yeah.
But blandings and spotteds, that's where those are turtles that are in Illinois. They're getting hammered to this day. They're
Mhm.
getting run over on roads. I don't think we'll ever, and I think John had maybe even said this on your podcast, I don't think we'll ever see commercialization of turtles happen again, which
Right.
is good. And I don't think anybody will ever allow it. But every day we're allowing people to build an Old Navy and a
Yeah.
Target and all that stuff and just completely eliminate habitat and then build roads. And there's places in, I think Florida has an area, and then there's another state where they built like a bridge over
Yeah.
the road for animals. And
Yeah. With the
so there's,
whole.
yeah, and Florida has one road where there's all these things under the road for turtles to pass under. So it costs more,
Mhm.
and so it's all about, that comes down to those guys like sitting around in some office with their legs crossed, wearing the shoes with the tassels and swirling the
That's
sky.
right. That's right.
Those guys making the deal, and you got to make it worth it to those guys.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah. Well, Greg, so this it all comes back. I want to close on this is to education. So I'm also a little government guy, and so people are like, well, how can you want to be for conservation and then also be like a small government guy? And whatever, dude, I could change because turtles come first, I think, for me. But for me, it's like if you knew about spotted turtles, if you knew about how cool blandings were, if you saw them, and you knew what you were doing to that habitat, because you think it's always some obscure, like in TV shows, there's always like the tree hugger, and he wants to save some obscure frog that no one's ever heard of or anything like that. And it's kind of, you laugh at him. You're supposed to laugh at him in the sitcom. But if you knew that, hey, actually there's a population of Blandings turtles right there, and you want to sell this land and you're going to destroy that whole that's been here. Those turtles live for 60 years or whatever. They've been here forever. You want to destroy them? If more people thought that way, moved up if that moved up in our ethos, like, things would change.
Yeah. I mean, there's places where when they build something, they're required. I want to say it was Florida and then some parts of different cities where they'll say you need to leave a certain amount of natural area.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a losing battle to try and completely fight people from building stuff.
Right.
I don't think we'll ever, and until, money doesn't matter and everybody's holding hands.
Yeah.
I mean, we would all have to be on a bunch of mushrooms for that. So that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
I think that there's always going to be a place for conservation, and I would like to hope that education, like, we're not, like I said, we're not going to reach those old guys,
right.
sitting around making those deals, but
right.
might reach their kids or their
Exactly.
grandkids.
Yeah.
And look at tattoos. When I was younger, if you had tattoos, dude, you had to be like an ex-con, or you had to have like served in the military, and you got like some lousy tattoo in like, Vietnam or something. But now tattoos are just like, so like, they're getting to be more commonplace, and that's a change in culture. That's a change in society. So I think for something, like turtles and wildlife to be more important, I don't know, man. I see that as being a cultural change, and I see it being totally possible.
Yeah.
I getting to be friends with Greg Whitstock, the pond guy, and Aquascape, and their whole thing about living the aquascape lifestyle. I mean, it's a tagline, 100% it is, but it's also true. The quality of these people's lives that have water features and are getting themselves back to nature. I think anything that's putting people back in touch with nature, even if it's a pandemic and people can't go to work, so they start canoeing and kayaking.
Yeah.
Now, dude, this past year, we have had a huge amount of people that now have a better appreciation for the world around them.
Yeah.
Because that was all they were able to do.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, man, that's so interesting. Greg's awesome. I'd love to have that dude on too. He's over, for any of the listeners, he's over in St. Charles, Illinois. You guys should go get a pond from him and then let me come over and look at it. That would be awesome. Greg, man, this has been so awesome. I really appreciate you coming on and schooling us on all things. I'd love to do it again. I got way more questions for you. That'd be sweet.
Yeah. I'm down to talk theology, philosophy, all kinds of stuff, man.
Dude.
I like your podcast. I love going down all different wormholes.
Dude, I appreciate that. Yeah. We're similar in that way. I don't know what the personality type or whatever is, but I find it in turtle people. I don't find it as, you'll know more people than I will, but snake people to me are they got full sleeves, they love leather, they got black nails. Like, this is a type of person that, at least in Illinois, that's snake people. There's different types of people. Like, I like snakes, I want to get snakes too, but if you're an exclusive snake, you fit a certain type of person, and it's fun getting to meet these people I never would meet otherwise. But yeah, man, I appreciate everything you're about, everything you're doing. It's cool that you're a hobbyist. I'm sorry to use it, right? But if that's cool, I think what's really cool is that you're transforming, and you have transformed into a conservationist, and you're someone who's taken turtle from people who don't want them, because you recognize that as a living being that you want to care for. So that's been really cool to see too, man. So I appreciate that. Everyone, go check out Greg's stuff. Greg, can you pitch it for us? Well, where can they find you at?
Yeah, Greg's Turtle Haven on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Across all platforms, just Greg's Turtle Haven.
Yeah.
And if you like turtles, if you don't like turtles, come check it out.
Yeah.
More than welcome to be a part of it.
How about that Flickr? How can people find those photos?
I think it's Snapper Greg.
Okay.
Flickr. I think
Sweet.
I started it a long time ago, and that was like a forum username or something I had.
Okay. Greg, you got Patreon?
I do have a Patreon, and it's Greg Turtle Haven on Patreon as well.
Okay. So if you guys have been motivated at all, encouraged by what he's doing, go and give to Patreon. He's not just like, for me, I like having them. I'm not doing any conservation work right now. Go and give to this dude. Like if you want to be about it, go put your money where your mouth is. If you're excited about that, go find him on Patreon and support him.
Yeah, and everything I make, whether it's off of YouTube or Patreon or anything, it just all goes back into the animals. You know, I have a job. I love my job. And so anything I make off of YouTube and Patreon, it goes back into my animals. It goes back into setups, even, gas money to go herping to be able to bring, what I see to my audience. So.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. All right. Well, this has been Parker's Pensées. We can talk about this more. Greg's going to come back. It's going to be awesome. But for now, it's going to have to do it. As always, all glory